Hey, thanks for clicking on my face and giving me a chance. I'm John Stark, and this is my review of Emilia Perez. This is currently available on Netflix if you want to check it out, and it's getting a lot of attention this year. It won a big award at Cannes for four of its actresses, and most Oscar prognosticators out there consider this to be a lock for Best Picture. Probably Netflix's best shot at a Best Picture nomination. Unfortunately, my opinion of the film is going to be wildly different than that of any other critic on YouTube because I'm also a blind film critic. And this film does not have the accessibility that I need to be able to watch it or to consider it for awards consideration for any of the groups for which I vote. And that's what we're going to talk about because I did sit through Emilia Perez. I think we live in a world where social media and comment sections have empowered a lot of people to talk about and to jump in on conversations without having experienced the thing that they are complaining about. Well, I did. I watched the 2 hour and 12-minute film Emilia Perez on Netflix the day it came out. It only came in Spanish and Spanish audio description. It has no other available languages. I sat through the film from beginning to end, and it is primarily in Spanish. It does have an English language sequence in it. Probably, I would say, an entire song that is sung in English, mostly about gender affirmation surgery, and some dialogue that's sort of around that. And then it kind of switches back into Spanish, and only occasionally will you hear, like, somebody say something in English. So there is a percentage of this film that's in English, and it does feature actresses who are well known to American audiences, like Zoe Saldana and Selena Gomez. It does. Carla Sofia Gascon is the one that's being submitted for Best Actress, but arguably Zoe Saldana, as many have mentioned, has equal, if not more, screen time in this film. But she is not playing Emilia Perez. Carla is. So this is an interesting film to talk about and to talk about accessibility and what that means and like why I'm here. Why am I doing this? Why am I asking you to watch this video? Why am I saying like, share, subscribe, comment, send this out into the ether? And it's because part of the reason I'm doing this is, well, I used to be able to see, and now I'm not. I have a degree in film. I went to film school, and then I lost my vision. So part of what I do is to talk about the lack of accessibility because, believe me, I understand. Blind film critic to you, when you hear those words, seems like you just heard the word Jabberwocky exists. You know, like somebody found Bigfoot. Oh my God. And I have absolutely fought that stigma of does my opinion matter in film? And I had a lot of that myself. I thought I stopped reviewing for years, for a few years, because I didn't know whether I could or should. But the more I listened to audio description and got involved with the blind community, of which there are millions of people in this country who identify as blind or low vision, I realized sort of where the level of accessibility was. And I know what it's like for you if you're sighted or if you're just completely like without a disability at all. And you're just walking through life. You don't think about the accessibility that you don't need unless there's somebody in your immediate vicinity that needs it, like a spouse or a child or a parent or like a best friend. You know, if it's not something that you regularly interact with, it's not something you're going to think about. However, these are major corporations that we're paying subscription fees to, and they absolutely know better. They absolutely know what audio description is, and it's on them. You know, I pay the same thing that you do for your subscription fees, but there's really only a fraction of the titles that actually have audio description on any given streaming service. I don't get a blind discount. There's no disability discount for me because of the fact that I do not have the same level of access as a fully sighted, as if I, 10 years ago when I was subscribed to Netflix. So because of that and paying them, I feel like I do have a right to talk about it. And the other concerning thing is I can't vote for it. I can't vote for something I don't understand. And audio description fills in a lot of those gaps. What it does is it takes a film and it takes the audio track and it adds in a lot of the visual elements, a lot of the aesthetics, a lot of the what's happening around it. What is, are we driving in a car? Is she wearing a red dress? Who just got killed in that horror movie? Did their head explode while being killed? Was it really gory? These are all things that we get in audio description because they're visual cues that you take for granted when you're sighted. I took them for granted too. I'm not blaming you. But when you're watching something like Emilia Perez, it's in Spanish. And I understand the stigma. I was there too. I faced a lot of we don't do dubbing as serious film people. We read subtitles. And believe me, I read subtitles. I showed up to all my films and I did exactly what I was supposed to do. And I read all the subtitles for years. And I've seen many international films. And I'm better for it because I have a better grasp on what a worldview is. And I know what these other countries are like. And I've been able to see what films are like from other countries. And it's a great experience. And it's one that the blind community should not be excluded from simply because we have a disability. So yeah, international cinema and television shows should be audio described, just like American movies and television shows. So unfortunately, many of them are not. And Netflix is an offender in this field. Netflix has failed to provide English audio description for films like Roma, Bardot, and El Conde, while also providing English audio description for random international fare like Killer Book Club, Divorce, Trouble, and Nice Girls. Have you heard of those? Because none of those were originally in English, and they all have audio description. Also this year, I've supported them by watching international TV shows that I really knew nothing about, but in order to show that there's a demand for something, we have to create a metric for it. That's my belief, which is why I do the things that I do. So I've seen Jiang Sung Creature. I've seen Parasite the Grey. I'm currently watching Last Nights at Traymore Beach. None of those are in English. They do have audio description on Netflix. They're totally random selections, though. I was unable to watch All My Friends Are Dead, which was sort of like one of those hit Korean shows following Squid Game. It didn't have audio description. Not every show does. And it seems to be very random in how they select and choose those shows. The thing about Emilia Perez is this is a movie that they acquired at Cannes. It won an award and they bought it. They made the choice to dive in on Emilia Perez. It was not something they initially created, but they chose it and they knew that they were buying an awards contender. And not only are they spending money on the film itself, but they're also spending money on an awards campaign. Now that awards campaign, audio description tracks are actually not that expensive to produce. For something like Emilia Perez, we're maybe talking about $2-3 tops, maybe. And they can't seem to do that. It's only like a couple $1,000. And to produce an actual human track, which is what it should be. Not a robot, not a robotic voice reading to me, but an actual human doing the work. And that provides for the writer, that provides narrator, that's quality control, that's sound mixing, that's everything to produce a quality audio description track. The kind of quality that Variety recently noticed when they published an article on the audio description for The Penguin, which is produced by International Digital Center, written by Dakota Green, and narrated by Ren Leach. Variety caught onto that. Earlier this year, there were articles written about the audio description for Netflix's Bridgerton and how it was turning into a social media trend. So audio description is something that is there. They know it's there. It's prevalent. But whether or not, some people actually need it. It may be cool for sighted people to turn on the audio description to Bridgerton to listen to the saucy audio description written by Liz Gutman, but it's also something that we actually need. It's sort of like Netflix saying, well, we're not going to provide we don't need to provide audio description for that because, you know, it's not enough blind people. And then comparatively, like a building being like, well, we don't really get wheelchair people here, so we just don't have a wheelchair accessible stall. And then that one day the wheelchair guy comes in and he's like, I need to use the bathroom. And they're like, oh shit, literally. Because we don't have the facilities. It reminds me a lot, actually, of Netflix's own Sex Education, which used a storyline in its final season, which had a character that was wheelchair bound who had basically gone through his whole life just trying to get out of bed every morning and continue to do as much as he can, and just sort of asked for reasonable accommodations in which to do so. But he went to a school whose elevator was consistently broken, and he was having to, he couldn't go to the second floor. And the school's attempted solution for that was carrying him up and down the stairs, to which he finally just said, no, you know, this is not, it's degrading to be carried up and down the stairs. You have an elevator, fix the lift. There's accessibility that people need. And when we voice and say, this is the accessibility that I need, this is the accessibility that we should have. I'm a subscriber to Netflix. This is the accessibility that I need for Emilia Perez. They're not providing it. So I'm making this video instead. In lieu of a full review of Emilia Perez. Was I able to understand the film at all? A little bit. I actually speak a little bit of Spanish, but in so much that I understood some phrases and some words. I really enjoyed the song Here I Am, or Here We Are, whichever one the title is. Aquí estoy and aquí estamos. That was pretty easy for me to follow because they chanted the same chorus over and over, and they were words that I knew, but I'm not fluent in it. And I, even within my own blind community, for which I pointed this out, people think I've seen people who are so used to being denied audio description and accessibility that they're like, well, really the priority was for Spanish, as if Netflix could only make one audio description track for anything ever, which is not the case, nor is it the case for other companies and other titles as well. Apple, currently, same day I watched an episode of Where's Wanda, which is a German television series that featured a segment where one of the characters actually sang, and I was sitting there having that question because I already knew Emilia Perez. I checked at the beginning, they did not have audio description, and I was like, well, how would they do it? And right there, they had a scene where the guy pulls out a guitar and he sings a song. Now, the whole thing has been dubbed, but they dropped the dubbing for the singing. This was their choice for the audio description of how to do this. So it was sung in German, and then they had the audio description team, instead of dubbed actors, the voice talent that does the dubbing, they had the audio description team come in and speak underneath it, thus providing us context of what the lyrics were. Which sometimes audio description teams have done. There haven't been dubcast. It's been entirely done through an audio description team, either through multiple narrators, like last year A24 did for Zone of Interest, which had an English audio description track that was made available for it, and everybody who provided voices, who read for every single one of the characters, was actually just a narrator, was just an audio description narrator. They just hired multiple of them to bounce through the characters. Or you could go kind of the cheaper route, like FX did for Shogun, where they just had one voice read everything. Or Max did for Tokyo Vice, where they had one voice read everything, and he just tries to change the tone in his voice when he's reading for female characters. But here, they just didn't even attempt it. This isn't, Emilia Perez is like Roma. It's in no other languages. It has no available, this Bardot, El Conde does have an English dub track, but it does not have audio description. So they went to the trouble of creating an English dub, but not an English audio description track, which is frustrating, to say the least. And I thought last year, when they jumped on board with Society of the Snow, providing audio description for J.A. Bayona's True Story and international Oscar entry from Spain, that would mean maybe Netflix was changing their ways and, describing more films. In 2022, I named my best picture of the year was All Quiet on the Western Front, which is Netflix's German Oscar entry from that year. They're fully capable of doing this. They just seem to choose, and more often than not, they seem to do it they seem to ignore films with talent that's south of the border, which is slightly problematic, or films coming from. But Emilia Perez is different because it may deceptively seem like it's from that, but it actually isn't. Even though it's in Spanish, it's currently being submitted by France for the International Oscar. It's from a French director. And as I mentioned, there's also English in here. So the case can be made that this film should have launched with Spanish audio description, French audio description, and English audio description. It kind of is all three. And this isn't even like Roma, where it takes place entirely in Mexico and is only in Spanish. This is actually a film that does come into America, does speak English, and then also, at the same time, is considered to be a French film, but has no French dubbing of any kind. It only offers them subtitles. So if you're blind and you're French, and you're really excited to know what this year's entry from your country is, well, you're just as screwed as everybody else. So the question is, what does Netflix do when presented with a musical? Not just an international film, but with a musical. Well, they dub it. And again, that's why I'm doing this, is because you may think, oh, well, it's impossible to dub a musical. And to that I would say, then no Disney film has ever left America. But let's talk specifically about Netflix. Netflix does have other musicals, specifically like Jingle Jangle, which has, while it only has an English audio description track, it is dubbed into multiple languages. So is Tick, Tick, Boom. Tick, Tick, Boom only has an English audio description track. However, you could watch that film in Spanish. You could watch it in French. It has multiple languages in which for you to be able to watch that film in, if dubbed. I don't know that there's a whole bunch of purpose in just dubbing things and not also providing audio description, because, again, there's a stigma to just listening to a dub. But they provide it. And then we go into Matilda, the musical, which actually has multiple audio description tracks. It actually has an English, a French, a German, and a Spanish. So for an English language British musical, they translated that into 4 different languages with audio description. It's actually available in a few more languages without audio description, but it does have 4 audio described languages, as does last year's Leo, the Adam Sandler animated movie, which has some music in it. It also was translated and audio described into 4 different languages. So these are movies that Netflix is fully capable of dubbing into other languages. So I would assume the way that they would do Emilia Perez would be like the reverse of that. So it's possible. It's entirely possible to do it. They just have chosen not to. It is actually a choice. That's what I want you to understand here, is that their disregard for accessibility is actually a choice. It's not something that's forced upon them. It's not a hardship on them. Ted Sarandos makes enough money every year that he could easily make a little bit less and Netflix could have a little more accessibility. I know billionaires hate to have those kinds of conversations about, oh my God, you mean I can't have 7 yachts? I might have to give up one of my 10 homes? Well, if it provides more accessibility for the service for which is making you money, why is that a bad thing? You're already stupid rich. Like, are you trying to single-handedly like have the GDP of like surpassing like that of developed nations? Like what is the goal here for you? Meanwhile, I'm sitting here at home paying your bullshit subscription fees that continue to raise while you continue to not be able to provide audio description for a film you acquired in May and knew you were running an awards consideration program for, and have no other available audio language tracks for this at all. Not for any other language other than Spanish, even though this is being submitted from France and has scenes in English. So, this is what I do. This is what most of my channel is. I'm a blind film critic, and I have been given the grace to be allowed into critics organizations and to talk about film, and to talk about film and accessibility in a way that is really, hopefully, productive, in a way that generates the kind of accessibility that we need. And I'm not trying to make money. I have frequently said it would be nice if I had like Chris Stuckman's list of subscribers, because if I was making this video to 2 million people, Netflix would immediately have to respond to it. But if I make this to my subscriber list as it is, I know I'm not fancy. I know I sit here and I talk into an iPhone, but the fact is I get up every morning and I do it. And I do it every day, and I watch the films, and I watch the audio description, I listen to audio description, and I talk about audio description, and I talk about what we need in audio description. Was the audio description good? Or if it was a film that didn't have the audio description, why did it not work? Like, what specifically about the film? Because as somebody who's been able to see and then also now cannot, I think I have that unique perspective to be able to say, so a few years ago, I would have expected this. I would have seen this. I would have done this. I know what this is. I know what color grading is. I know all of those things. And I have the degree to back it up. But at the same time, I'm now here. And I'm limited into the way things are presented to me. And from there, I'm limited into just the way accessibility even exists. The way that audio description fails to travel. There was somebody who was giving Netflix credit simply for managing to have an audio description track for a film that they didn't create. That's not their audio description track. All they had to do was contact the company and say, hey, we have your movie on our service. Can we have the audio description track for it? Like, that's not a hand clap. That is not provide. That's like going to a business and being like, oh my God, a wheelchair ramp. Thank you. Thank you so much for this wheelchair. I did not expect this. This is very nice. Thank you for the wheel. Like, no, some of this stuff should be really basic, but sadly it's not. And that's why people don't get excited about it. The truth is, if a film has audio description, it should travel, but there's no law that requires it. There's no law that says that the accessibility once created has to travel with the film. So an audio description track theoretically could be created for theatrical release and then never heard again. Or an audio description track could be created and only used on one streaming service, thus creating sort of like a disparity in, how many streaming services are blind people willing to pay for, as we have to hop around. There's an actual list called the Audio Description Project of titles and where you can find them. And what you'll notice is some titles are not available everywhere. Some titles have audio description, but it's only available in certain places. And in really obvious cases too, where you're like, well, at the bare minimum, right? You've got physical media. That's easy because that can support multiple audio tracks. It always has. It's always had other languages on it, and it's had director's commentary. So why wouldn't it have audio description on there? You would be surprised. Believe me, I have nearly 1,000 DVDs. I have a handful of them that have audio description on them. Like less than 50. So it's a fraction. And then when you look at VOD services like the Apple Store, Fandango at Home, Prime Video, those don't consistently all have the same audio description tracks, even though they should. Even though that's the VOD release, that's the home video release. That's the studio sending out their programming and saying, here it is, and here's the accessibility that goes with it. For some reason, that can't even happen correctly all the way. So then when we get to streaming services bouncing around audio description, we're done at that point, because good luck. So the fact that we're praising Netflix for having acquired audio description to a title that isn't theirs, it's a library title. It's a catalog title for them. That's really sad. And it says more about how we've become so accustomed to the lack of accessibility that just seeing a grain of it, just a shred of it, gets us excited. And that's a shame, because as somebody who spent 34 years in the fully sighted world, that world, you just kind of walked in and you were like, I don't know, what movies are playing? What's that? I don't even know what that's about. That starts in 10 minutes. I'm going to go see that. You just kind of go and you don't have to think about things. But we do. We have to think about, okay, does this theater have accessibility? What does it have the devices? It's supposed to, with the ADA. Do they work? That's a question. The quality of the device. There's a difference between having something and having something that works or is of the quality that works. Sort of like if you're, you're sitting there and you're like, man, I'm really hungry. I could really kill for a cheeseburger, like a really great meaty cheeseburger. And then you get one crystal. You're like, don't these usually come in packs? You just said you wanted a cheeseburger, man. Is that enough? How hungry are you? And apparently blind people are really hungry. So, and for good reason, because we've been starved by Hollywood for so long that we don't even know what it's like to request for our own accessibility. I live and work around, I'm not on disability. I have a job. I get paid. I'm not draining the economy. I'm trying to do as much as I can, despite the fact that I was dealt a blow, that I was thrown a curveball, that I had to take the road less traveled. I still work, and I have encountered other people who are blind and visually impaired, and I encounter people who have tried to avoid the stigma, because let's face it, you've all heard and seen parents who have those little kids. They're like, don't stare. I know people are looking. When I walk with my stick, I don't have a fucking choice. That's it. I can't do anything else except be blind. So if you want to stare, stare. I have been asked some of the dumbest questions about my blindness. I've had people who try to show me shit on cell phones, and they know I'm blind. They're like, here, look at this. I'm like, do you not understand what this means? I've had people who ask me what my stick is for, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm divining. I'm trying to find water. Like, what do you think this is for? Like, no, I always answer those questions as kindly and politely as possible, because I want people to not have to ask them again, because I know there are a lot of other people in life who are dealing with far more than me. And anytime somebody asks me one of those silly questions, I always try to answer it. And that's why I'm here. That's why I have a YouTube channel, because I can take it. Because I can take the stupid comments about how my opinion doesn't matter. I don't have a voice. Blind people should shut up and go away. I can take all of that. I've seen it before. I was on a search for a DVD player, and in the comments section where somebody else had posted about looking for a DVD player that had accessibility, there was somebody in that thread who said, I don't understand why blind people watch movies and television shows. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Are we supposed to go live in a commune somewhere? I forgot. I didn't get that memorandum from when I went blind. Somebody forgot to send that to me. So the best thing I can do is advocate for myself, to advocate for my community. I'm not making money from doing this. I just am doing it. I'm just out here in this world trying to do the best job that I can. And right now, Netflix is not doing enough. Emilia Perez absolutely should have an English audio description track. It absolutely should have a French audio description track. It should be dubbed into English and French. As far as other languages beyond that, That's up to them. They know their metrics. They know whether or not they should have a German dub or an Italian dub or a Portuguese dub or Mandarin or whatever. But this film is most likely going to be really an anchor, a pillar of award season. Over and over and over, you're going to hear the term Emilia Perez. And every time you hear that, I want you to know that the blind and visually impaired community has been excluded from this film. English language speaking, actually really any language speaking other than Spanish, has been excluded from this film, regardless of where you come from. The only people who have been included are Spanish, native Spanish speakers into this conversation, which, as I pointed out, Netflix has no problem with other movies that originated in English, translating those into other languages. So why should they have a problem translating Emilia Perez, starring Zoe Saldana and Selena Gomez, into multiple languages? That's the question. Will Netflix ever answer it? Probably not. Why? Because I have 325 subscribers. That's the truth of it. And while I'm trying to, and I'm very gracious to have the membership of a couple of guilds, so I'm voting for a couple of awards, and I'm getting the FYC campaigns, and I did reach out to at least somebody who was running the campaign for Emilia Perez to ask. I have not heard back. I do not have an answer to that. But they had plenty of time to produce an audio description track for Emilia Perez, and they didn't. And how do we change this? What can you do? Well, it would be great if you liked and shared, even if you don't want to subscribe. You could at least do that. The likes will help trend. You viewed it already. Sharing it could help some other people listen to it, and that can help gain momentum. You probably won't, though. I know. But what can Hollywood do? Well, I would say, and this is a little bit of a point of contention, because when people start talking about diversity requirements, everybody lost their fucking minds last year for Best Picture. But I've only used the F-bomb twice. I think I'm still within PG-13 territory. So, but we have a system that is set up in a way where Hollywood and certain film festivals and awards bodies could really actually change the trajectory of accessibility. If they started having, if all of these festivals had accessibility requirements, like when Sundance had Marlee Matlin on the jury, and there was a film that didn't provide closed captioning for her, open captioning or whatever for her, and they walked out because her accessibility needs were not met. If more film festivals required that every film that submitted had captioning and audio description for all festival attendees, so that way anybody who was hearing impaired, deaf, blind, visually impaired, had access to the full range of titles at the festival instead of just, well, these two films have tracks. You know? If Sundance, TIFF, Venice, if the New York Film Festival, you know what I'm saying? Like, if these big film festivals started requiring audio description, and then on top of that, if the big awards bodies started requiring that films submitted must have accessibility met for their voting body, we don't know that there aren't Oscar voters who aren't like hearing impaired or visually impaired and that need accessibility. You don't know that. There are a lot of people who are Academy voters. There are blind people in SAG. There are blind actors in SAG. And if you're sending them Emilia Perez without English audio description, what are they going to do? Are they supposed to vote for it? So, if these groups started requiring accessibility, a lot of films would have to start getting accessibility guaranteed. And a lot of really interesting films too. We would get more international content because every international film that's submitted would have to submit with required accessibility. but also films simply just looking for like a makeup nomination or visual effects nomination. Short films would get audio description. We would gradually be expanding the horizon of what we can view as blind and visually impaired users. That's a great, great future that I would love to see happen, that I'd love to live in, that I don't think is ever going to happen. But much like Emilia Perez chants quite rapidly in her own film, Carlos Sevilla Gascon, I'm assuming, here I am. Here we are. Aquí estoy, aquí estamos. And we're an audience. We just want accessibility needs met. It's really not that hard. I appreciate you for listening to this. I'm sorry it's not a more substantial review of Emilia Perez, but if you want my grade, currently my grade is it's unwatchable. And I've given that grade before, and unfortunately I have to give it to Emilia Perez because aside from one scene spoken in English and occasionally words I was able to pull out from the little bit of Spanish that I know, I really couldn't follow this. And I did. I sat through 2 hours and 12 minutes of it, all the way from beginning to end. And so I know what it is I'm talking about. I experienced the thing for which I'm complaining about. Netflix says this is the way that I can enjoy the movie. Well, they're wrong. So thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I appreciate you. And I'll see you guys on the other side.